Hello guys, Tops here. Today I want to make a new weapons tier list. I want to update the last one because it's an older one. My opinions have changed on some things. Also, I want to be a little bit better with the ranking within the tiers. So, good two-handers are, in my opinion, the highest damage weapon, especially if they attack twice. So they are at the top. Below that, we have the good polearms, who kind of go in conjunction a lot of the times with the big two-handers. Then we have the good duelists. And after that, we have special weapons. Then we have good early game stuff, or better than nothing. Okay, so generally for the early game, you want to have swords and spears because they have additional hit chance on the weapon attack. So early game, like swords, spears, and shields is kind of what you want to do. Flails are also not too bad because of the additional accuracy versus shield users. Yeah, but you usually don't build around swords and spears for like duelist weapons. But we get into this later. Okay, let's start with the weapon classes. The knives, okay. The knives, the daggers. You use them for puncture, so you want to surround one opponent, puncture him to death, because puncture does 100% hit point damage and ignores all of the armor. So you can loot the armor afterwards. If weapons or armor are damaged, you can't loot them. So you have to get the undamaged armor through stabbing the brigands to death, and then you get your brigands armor. So the dagger is, for that case, I would say, a special weapon if I can find it. Yeah, special weapon for daggering down opponents. And the butter knives and everything else, they are kind of fine for the early game, or if you I don't know, if you find them, all that kind of stuff. The Katal duelists are good duelists in my opinion. They do relatively good damage because they can attack 3 times with Dagger Mastery, and you can death blow for additional damage against a dazed or stunned or trapped in net target. So pretty nice there, pretty good damage. And really good utility. Next one, the swords. As I already said, you want to use the one-handed swords, the short swords and falchions. Those are the brigand swords, because they do relatively high damage and have additional accuracy. But the tier 3, there are always 3 weapon tiers, right? The tier 1, the tier 2, and the tier 3. And usually you want to use the tier 3 weapons because they just are better, they do more damage, have more durability, more armor pen, all that kind of stuff. But they are more expensive and more dangerous opponents have them, right? So they are harder to loot, more expensive to buy, all that stuff. So usually you get these weapons later in the game, and you want to use the tier 3 weapons for the late game, for the real late game builds, right? Or for the real builds in general. Okay, so the Shamshir, there's a fun build where I do Crippling Strikes Gash Duelist, because Crippling Strikes lets you injure opponents more likely, and with Crippling Strikes, if you combine that, you have a fun build where you just injure your opponent the whole time. Pretty memey, kind of funny though. The Noble Sword is pretty good, does overall pretty good damage, and I like the Sword Duelist. I have made a video about that, Horst, the Sword Duelist. You can take any brother and make him into a Sword Duelist, so that's why I think it's the strongest build in the game. Works on every bro, you just give him fast adaptation and some dodge, and then he's a fast brother with relatively high defense and still good damage versus most, if not all, targets. And the next one is the Fencing Sword. The Fencing Sword is a special build for the fencer because you want to use the lunge attack, which does damage based on initiative and lets you jump 1 tile and ignore zone of control. So pretty funny, pretty memey. But if you find a good one, they can kind of carry you in certain fights. Pretty nice to have cool fencers. Yeah, so overall, swords not a bad weapon tier at all, especially early for all of your garbage bros who don't have accuracy. You want to use swords because of the additional accuracy. And for late game, I would say special weapon, the Shamshir for the memes. And then we have, of course, the other swords. This one for a good duelist weapon. Falchions, Saivs is the good stuff that you loot in between. By the way, if we come to loot, the loot is a one-time use weapon, gets destroyed on use. Peasants have them sometimes, and you can stun an opponent. It's a mace, and you get an achievement. So use it once, get an achievement, stun your opponent. Okay, these are swords. Now we go to two-handed swords. And the Romfire is a sword that comes from Ancient Undead, so unlikely that you have that. Pretty crappy overall. The Warbrand is actually a pretty good sword because it can attack twice per turn for a two-handed weapon. Has additional accuracy, and Brigand Raiders drop them. So you can get this weapon early on, and it does pretty good damage early on. Brigand Raiders also have the longsword, which is just worse than this one, but it has AoE. And the Greatsword is actually pretty nice for late game, because you have high base damage and really good AoE. With Sword Mastery, your AoE gets additional hit chance. So I like to use this on my flanking guy. Just take a relatively flanking guy who has a relatively low melee attack and fix the low melee attack with the Greatsword and let him protect the flank. So overall, the Greatswords. Let's grab the Greatswords. This one, early on not too bad if you have a brother that can wield it. Otherwise, not too great though. Greatsword is my first good two-hander that I like. And this one is good early as well. The Romfire, where's the Romfire? Doesn't matter, I will find it later. Let's keep going. Maces, the one-handed ones. They can stun with Mace Mastery. You have 100% chance to stun. And the normal attack inflicts additional fatigue. I think Mace Duelist, the Winged Mace, is the best mace. Mace Duelist are overall the most balanced duelist. They do, versus most targets, the best damage because they have relatively high base damage, good armor pen, especially with Duelist, and good armor efficiency. So they excel at smashing Ancient Undead because of their low hit points, but they're also still good versus all other opponents. So like the Winged Mace is, I would say, the best all-round duelist weapons. I kind of like it. And I don't like Orc weapons because they have additional fatigue cost. Wooden Stick, pretty nice early game to stun the Brigand Raiders and stuff. Also you can backpack them if you fight versus Hex and you have to stun your own brothers and you don't want to kill your own brothers, then this one's pretty nice. Good duelist weapon. Overall, pretty nice early game weapons, as I said. Having a shield mace guy early game is good to have, especially if you fight stuff like Brigand Raiders, who can be really scary early on, like if they have a Brigand leader, right? So, good to have. Next one. Oh, now we come to the two-handed category. Two-handed maces. They do a lot of damage. And again, they are probably, because of their stats, the best two-handed weapon overall versus most targets. At least the tier 3 mace. This one is not too bad either. Gets dropped by brigands. Don't like the barbarian one because of the low damage. Pole mace is okay, but not great. You can stun, so it has utility. So I would rank this. Gurdendag is actually pretty nice early on. Again, thugs can have it, so like it's a super early game weapon. It's a spear mace, so you can have additional accuracy and the stun. Good utility early on, I would say. Oopsie, that was the wrong one. This one, pretty nice to have early on. Two-handed mace, one of the best two-handed weapons overall, I would say. And where's the barbarian mace? There we go. Usually don't like the barbarian maces. Don't worry, at the end we will rank everything else. Next one, one-handed spears. Again, plus 20% accuracy, so that's why you want to use them early. And because Spear Wall is super nice for controlling dangerous AI, like Orcs and Chosen respect the Spear Wall. So even late game, Spear Wall has some utility. I actually would like to rank the Fighting Spear as a special weapon, because there is the special build of a spear guy with like a shield, so a spear tank, and he just provides area of control, potentially even with taunt, to just completely fuck up the AI and hold one flank and let the enemies run around trying to avoid the spear wall. And the rest is just good early game damage. So spears are pretty simple in that regard. Good early on, but as soon as your accuracy increases, you want to have other weapons in your company. Although the famed Goblin Spears are pretty nice for your tanks, because they provide you with additional hit chance while also not being too heavy in general. The Goblin weapons, super light. So that's why you tend to want to use them on your tanks. All right. So that's spears. Huh? The damage is, in my opinion, too low to make a proper duelist out of them. But if you find a famed one, you might try. By the way, every time you find like a famed weapon who has like additional damage and or additional armor pen, you kind of want to make a brother for this, and this might be then still pretty good late game. Okay, the two-handed spears. Again, the Golden Dark is a spear mage. We already talked about him. The Speartam and the Warfork, they're kind of like the first early game polearms. So they can do spear wall, but also stab, which is pretty nice. Yeah, again, just the good early game stuff. I will not rank the early game stuff in like specific categories. I just put them in order as I have them here. Because honestly, I don't think it matters too much, all the good early game stuff. You know, you kind of use what you have early game, right? Axes. The chop ability, the one-handed ones, they do a 50% hit point damage on headshots, which is pretty nice. They can split shields. And the hammer axes, they can, they inflict at least always 10% damage, 10 hit point damage on body hits. Yeah, the barbarian one, and I think where's the minus? Where's the minus? Might not be an X. Okay, whatever. But better, it has the same attack. It has the same icon. Okay, so axes have high damage on headshots. The problem is, and that's why I usually don't like this fighting axe at all, is they are super fatigue intensive, and you kind of want to combine them with headhunters, but you already are super perk staffed on a duelist, because you need duelist, and then you kind of need recover, and then you want to go for headhunter, so it's like super perk intensive to do a fighting axe. But if you find a brute guy, you can still do a fighting axe guy. Fighting axe duelist. Some people tend to do famed orc weapons as a duelist with nimble. I tend to not like that, but you can go for that. But in general, I would say even early game, I don't use the axes, because you run out of fatigue if you don't have mastery. The damage is high, but you don't have additional accuracy, so most of the time your bros can't even use that. So the one-handed axes are a weird weapon class that I kind of never use if I can. Like, I don't think it's a good duelist weapon late game. Not really, at least. I should put this in special. Let's put this in special tier. If you find a brother for that, then it's all right. But yeah, the rest is kind of like you use them if you have nothing else, or if you just want to have the raw damage output, you use the one-handed axes. Outside of that, I wouldn't use them at all. Yeah, the one-handed axes are, like, in my opinion, not that great. But don't worry, the two-handed axes are probably the best ones in the game. Probably the best weapons category. You know why? They do a fuck ton of damage. all of them. Because Split Man hits both body and head for additional damage, which is just insane. Like the single target damage of the Split Man is the highest in the game. You have really high additional damage to split shield with Mastery. You can split with the Badish, which is the same split with the Greatsword. Problem is your armor penetration goes from 40% to 30%, so Badish is actually not that great. The round swing is pretty, it's pretty hard to achieve, and doesn't do that much damage, has less hit chance, less armor pen, so not that great. The Woodcutter's Axe, Brigands have them. I tend to not use it, but does a lot of damage early on. Heavy Rusty Axe and Great Axe are the super nice weapon that I want to use late game. Definitely. I always make the low fatigue guys who have high attack and defense into my Battleforge two-handed axe guy. Of course, you can make them nimble, right? And then you can sacrifice a little bit of defense. Like you can also, what I really like to do is go quick hands with my Great Axe and then quick hands to my long axe and still have a capable two-handed weapon that has another tile of reach. So my threat range with Pathfinder is always 3 tiles. Even if I'm completely out of fatigue, I become fatigue neutral. Again, I have all the build videos and the build guide. You can watch this separately if you don't really know what I'm talking about. And this one has more armor pen, less base damage. This one has more base damage with less armor pen. So depending on the target choice, this one tends to one-shot the low hit point, medium armor stuff more than this one, but this one just does more damage to unarmored targets. And it's roughly the same damage. These ones are the barbarian ones. These ones you can get from brigand leaders and hedge knights. So these ones come from chosen, for instance. Badish again is just the worse version of the Great Axe. Therefore it has the option of AoE, which is kind of crappy. But relative reliable AoE if you have good melee attack. But again, like it's lower base damage, low armor pen, lower armor efficiency. It's just, if you want to have a reliable AoE, I would recommend the Greatsword. And for the Great Axe build, I usually go for a Great Axe Long Axe or Heavy Rusty Axe Long Axe. Mansplitter, again, orc weapons have additional fatigue to equip and additional fatigue to use. So outside of the memes, I don't use this weapon, but this one does probably the highest damage in the game. Orc Berserkers and Warlords have them. Nasty weapons. Try to kill the Berserkers if they have these big axes. Axes overall, probably my most favorite two-handed weapons, because the axe does not discriminate. The axe doesn't care. The axe just smashes. And like it's good versus all targets, right? It just deletes everything it touches. The damage is just beyond evil and good. Really like it. You're gonna have a lot of fun with that weapon if you take it, I promise. Super nice. Okay, flails, one-handed flails. Flail ignores the defense bonus of shields, and the lash has a 100% chance to hit the head, and with mastery also ignore the bonus defense of shields. So this is nice early on if you want to loot brigand raiders that don't have headgear and you want to loot the body armor. So having one-handed flail guys for early armor looting is pretty nice. Three-handed flail does a lot of damage, but like is super swingy and splits the attack into 3 attacks, so the cascades. So even the problem with flails is the one-handed flails. There's not really a tier 3 weapon. So like this, it stops at tier 2 basically. So this is a weapon that I exclusively use early game, the one-handed flails. But early game they are pretty good for farming armor for your company basically. There's not much else to say. The two-handed flails though are super nice for the late game. I like the pound. Does bonus damage, does even more bonus damage on headshots with mastery, has a 30% chance to stun the target. The thrash is the AoE, again, negative hit chance, hard to hit, 20% chance to stun, lower damage. Yeah, and as always, the two-handed weapons, the single target attack does plus 20 damage, has in this case additional armor pen and additional armor pen on headshots. I think with mastery you go up to 60% armor pen and headshots with the two-handed flail. And this one is super nice if you combine it with Headhunter. And if you find somebody, if you can stack damage on top of that, so if you get like stuff like Killing Frenzy or a Famed Flail or somebody who is Brute, who does like plus 15% damage on headshots, you can reliably two-shot Orc Warriors and other opponents as well. You might just one-shot the weaker opponents right away, like the Brigands, because they don't have Steel Brow, they just get one-shotted. Super nice. Also, this ignores the defense bonus of shields, so just casually equipping the two-handed flails for against skeletons or noble houses with shield wall users might be something. Again, Orc Flail is a meme weapon, but yeah, pretty nice. Again, has additional headshot chance. This two-handed flail comes from the Brigand Raiders, and I would say it's nice early on for the utility. This one is actually a nice two-handed weapon. I like. Cleavers, one-handed cleavers. So the cleave attack inflict 5 bleeding. If you do at least 6 hit point damage, this goes up to 10 if you have Cleaver mastery. Decapitate does has a bonus damage that scales with first health. Yeah, so I think it was half of the base damage of the weapon, and then additional damage for every hit point below 50 or something like that. I don't know exactly, but it does additional damage if you decapitate on low hit point targets. Usually it's worth, if your opponent is like below half hit points, to just start decapitate. Cleaver mastery is also whip mastery, which means you can just attack from 3 tiles range. It's the only melee weapon that has 3 tiles range. Can cause bleeding. Again, with mastery, goes up to 10 per stack. And can disarm, has a minus 20% chance to it though. So you really need somebody with really high attack. Yeah, so these the early game cleavers are kind of garbage. And then you get to the military cleaver, which are kind of okay duelist, but I think they just get outshined by the big two-handed cleavers. Some people like to use the Orc cleavers, I don't. And the whip is always decent utility versus Geists, and the disarm versus like very strong opponents. Yeah. Okay, I would say this one is a good duelist weapon, the military cleaver. And the one-handed cleaver before that, you kind of use them if you have nothing else. The zombies have them, so they can be quite sketchy if used against you. Special weapons, I would say, are the whips because of their utility. They do something no other weapon can do, basically. All right, next one. Two-handed cleavers. Super nice DPS. I always build a two-handed cleaver because the two-handed cleaver can attack twice per turn, costs 4 action points, and I get a famed rusty warblade from the icy cave where I defeat the madman. Again, the cleave doubles with cleaver mastery, and decapitate again is, I think, half of your base damage in addition. So just the additional base damage makes decapitate so much better. Also, you have less armor penetration with the normal one. So the rusty warblade is probably better because you have 10 additional armor penetration. The armor efficiency is much higher though than the one-handed cleavers. So I always, also these weapons can attack twice per turn. They have 4 action point cost. They are the only two-handed weapons that can do this with the Warbrand together. So I always think, like, if you want to make a cleaver, like, you can do the duelist, but just making the two-handed cleaver is probably better because you have way more base damage and you get a free famed one. So I recommend this build though. I recommend this build. I would say for late game tier 2 weapons, I would probably put it like this. Both of these cleavers there. Saif, if you have the fatigue, is kind of funny early on, I would say. But outside of that, same with the grip cleaver if you find it. Yeah, outside of early game. These ones have come from the nomads. If you have an early cleaver bro, you can use it. It's not too bad if you have a good attacker. Okay, the one-handed hammers. The beta inflicts always at least 10 hit point damage. And you have the secondary attack, which does a lot of armor damage. Does additional armor damage and inflicts at least 10 hit point damage. Also has the split shield attack. The at least 10 hit point damage means that you always trigger Fearsome on opponents. And the Warhammer, usually hammers are pretty poorly balanced. They have low base damage but really high armor efficiency. So they are poorly balanced in that way. Like they just excel versus certain opponents that are super heavily armored. So the Hammer Duelist, I think, has lower hits to kill versus Chosen and Orc Warriors and stuff, but like against everything else, because of the lower base damage, the Mace Duelist is just better. There is a special build though, where you take Fearsome and Crippling Strikes and you have like a shield Warhammer guy and you just smack stuff and trigger Fearsome and all of that. I mean, the other hammers are just, look at they have so poor base damage, I wouldn't even think about taking these. But like if you have to fight heavy armored opponents early on, you might equip hammers for your early game bros. Maybe. Okay, I would say, is this a good duelist? It's probably the lowest duelist. But if you find a famed hammer with additional armor damage and everything, and armor pen and base damage, pretty nice. You can, with duelist, go up to almost 100% armor penetration with these. We had this once on a run. Pretty nasty. Yeah, and as you can see, the two-handed hammers, they have the smite, does additional damage, staggers, which lowers the target's initiative. The shatter is an AoE attack that has negative chance to hit. Is kind of memey. I don't like it too much. Because you can knock back your opponents with this attack, which like has its own anti-synergy. So like your opponent gets knocked back, then he steps on a tile again, which gives you another chance to fail a moral check. An orc might charge you again, or the guy just goes after somebody else. So like a lot of the time is not that great. So there is the AoE hammer build for the left flank because it hits counterclockwise. I don't like this build. You need just too many stats to make it work for like a brother that generally doesn't do much damage. I like to have more the AoE great swords for my flank. Although I have to say I like the normal build where I just take a quick hand guy with the two-handed hammer, and then in my pocket I have the pole hammer, and then I have quick hands. That's just for the additional utility. As you can see, we have much less base damage than all the other two-handed weapons, but we have really high armor efficiency and good armor penetration. Yeah, so yeah, they struggle from the lower base damage a lot actually. And as you can see, the pole hammer has the same thing, so can proc reliably Fearsome. Also does additional armor damage to armor. Also, this goes up if you have hammer mastery, so you do even more armor damage. So having these weapons just for utility, having a quick hand hammer guy who can stagger, reliably proc Fearsome, and reliably destroy armor from like the super high armored opponents, like the Orc Warlord. If you fight an Orc Warlord who has like 500 armor, you really want to have a hammer guy versus him. You can also stagger him and proc Fearsome reliably. Or if you fight like an armored Unholz who also has like 500 armor. So these ones, good two-handed weapon, a good pole weapon, and the barbarian ones, garbage because of the low damage. The mallet is from the Brigand Raiders. Pretty good early on if you want to stagger something, but not late game relevant in my opinion. Oh, actually, forgot the pole mace. There we go. Okay, polearms. Polearms, we have the single target attack it has additional hit chance. The repel, you can push an opponent, stagger him, it's kind of nice. You have the strike, again single target from the other polearms. You can hook, which can pull an opponent closer. So as you can see, the pikes and polearms are already pretty nice utility. Rupture is from the goblin pike, inflicts bleeding, pretty nice. And the reap is the AoE attack from the sword lance. Okay, and these ones, as you can see, additional hit chance, good early game. The jack pike has the benefit that it basically gives you polearm mastery because it has reduced action points use. So this one gives you basically polearm mastery without having polearm mastery. So this is always a good backpack weapon. For every bro, you can cheese AI with that, and you can inflict bleeding. Pretty nice versus stuff like lindworms and all that good stuff. Battle standard is in here, of course, for the additional resolve. That's like it's 10% of your character's base resolve that gets added to everybody around. Pretty nice for that. Yeah, and again, pikes, billhook has relatively high single target damage. Good for the crossbow polearm build. And the sword lance is actually my favorite build when it comes to damage because of the AoE. You can just walk 2 tiles in AoE. Also, you can berserk an AoE twice. So if you find somebody who has like a relatively low defense, but stuff like the huge trait where he gets negative defense but additional melee damage, I like to make those guys into sword lancers, right? Because also you need high melee attack and high fatigue. But if I can find a guy who has that kind of stats, they are always the highest kills. I like to have them behind my greatsword guys on the flank. So I have just massive AoE on the flanks and can prevent my company from getting swarmed and kill all the stuff that comes at the flank. Again, if you stack AoE, it does enough damage that it adds up even versus heavy armored opponent, even if you don't have the armor penetration. So, battle standard is of course a special weapon, as you can see, or as you guys know what I mean. These ones are pretty good reliably early game damage if you find it, and these ones are just good pole weapons for your quick hands and whatnot, for your quick hand users or for your late game guys. Yeah, using specifically designed polearm guys for the late game is something I tend to not do. I just like to have the sword lance. Okay, let's do the ranking inside of the tiers. So now we go to the big two-handers. I would say overall the Mace is the best one, I would say, because it has high base damage, high armor penetration, it can stun, it can daze on a hit. It's just the best all-around weapon versus all targets. And after that, I would probably rate the Axis for the same reason. After that, I would probably say I like the Greatsword because it's super nice for my flanking guys to hold the flank, additional hit chance, all of that. After that, I would say the two-handed cleavers because I always find the famed one, and with Decapitate you have super high single target damage and the bleeding and all that good stuff with normally a quick hand whip, so you have additional utility as well. After that, I like to have a two-handed flail if I find the famed one or if I want to break shield walls. It's always good to have like one guy with a two-handed flail who can just open up the shield walls and get your company to break in and smack them with Headhunter and maybe a Brute Trait or a famed one if you find one. And the last big two-handed weapon, I tend to build this the least. Sometimes I don't build the quick hand hammer guy at all. And yeah, but it's nice to have the Dagger and the potential AoE if the opportunity comes. But normally I like the quick hand hammer build more. So yeah, this is kind of like my intern rating of the big two-handed weapons, the good ones. Next ones are the polearm. I would say sword lance, first place, always the highest killer on my team. Like it a lot. After that, I would say the long axe is just because it does relatively high single target damage, good for my X quick hands guy. After that, I would probably say they're all kind of at the same tier. So like this one is good for the crossbow polearm build, and like it's not too bad for everybody else, like as additional utility. Like you have to imagine the good polearms, right? The sword lance is the only dedicated polearm build that I built. These ones are all kind of backpack weapons for my big two-handers, right? So let's keep this in mind. So yeah, let's kind of put them in an order like so. Like then in these ones are in relatively at the same place. They are just a quick and two-handed version, backpack version for these ones, right? Okay. Next one, sword duelist. Sword the first, because I think, as I said, it's the best build in the game. You can take any bro and make him into a sword duelist. I stand by that. Pretty nice in that regard. Same is probably true for the Katal. You can technically take every brother into a Katal duelist, but the Katal has not the plus 10 hit percent, plus 10% hit chance. The one-handed sword does. Also, like this one has more armor efficiency and more armor penetration. So, yeah. But the dagger can attack 3 times. So with death blows, not too bad. But overall, I would say the Mace Duelist is the best one. When it comes for raw damage and you have free choice of a recruit, but you need to have a good recruit who has high attack, defense, and high fatigue to use this thing. But you have best overall target damage, and yeah, maybe like so. Maybe like so, the Katal after this. Then the Hammer Duelist, who just excels against Orc warriors and other super heavy target opponents. The Cleaver Duelist, again, is okay, but I just would make a two-handed Cleaver instead. But you can make a Cleaver Duelist, is fine, but then we have to spend an additional perk point. But yeah, you have more armor penetration with less base damage, so I would say overall the same. Okay, special weapons, tier list. Again, this is in no particular order. They are just special weapons for a reason, because yeah, this one gives you an achievement. This is the banner. These are the whips that can disarm. The spear for control. The fighting axe for if you actually find like a super special bro. Same with the fencing sword. Shamshi is a meme build. And the dagger for just puncturing down armor is always a backpack weapon for all of your bros until the late game. And again, these ones are just in the order, like early game, you want to have swords and spears for the additional accuracy, swords, spears, shields, daggers, flails to loot armor, all that kind of good stuff. So these are in no particular order. You kind of use whatever you have, whatever you feel like, and yeah, whatever your brothers can afford to use, basically. Yeah, all right, guys. I think this is it for today's tier list. I try to put it in a format where it's basically, this is the highest damage, and then we go from there down here. You can argue that duelists can definitely compete with these pole weapons, probably in terms of damage output. But again, these are more the backpack weapons for the big two-handers, and I didn't want to put them in the same category. If I had to do so, I would put them in this category. Again, duelists excel at killing stuff that has low hit points and medium armor, so like brigands and all that stuff, but in general cannot compete with the raw damage output from the big two-handers, especially when it comes to harder to kill opponents like orcs and yeah, barbarians and all that stuff. Special weapons, there is a utility for all of them, a use case for all of them. The loot specifically for the achievement. And yeah, I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I have all the build, I have a huge build guide, and I have a lot of videos on the single builds, and I always make videos if I find out something new, if I change my mind, I find a new combo. Please let me know if you have any kind of cool combos that I missed. And I hope you found this declaration useful. Again, going from high damage to like low damage, high utility. This is low damage, high utility, and the more higher the weapons are, the more damage they do. And I think there's nothing more fun than smashing everything with the big two-handers. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.